The sun was rising over Camp Falcon Ridge, blending into the air a sharp mix of sand, fuel, and hot metal. In the distance, the helicopters were waking up one by one, stirring the ochre dust that clung to boots. Dana Mercer, helmet pulled down over her head, closed her shooting logbook and wiped the fog off her rifle scope. The day hadn't even begun, and she already felt the familiar weight of routine. Those hours stretching between two alerts, the contradictory orders murmured by officers too young to understand what they were asking. That morning, Captain Ryan Halstead had called her. A clear voice, full of the kind of confidence found in men who have never been tested. He held in his hands an M110 SDS rifle, still too clean, and examined it the way one looks at an instrument rather than a weapon. Behind him, two sergeants chuckled quietly. "Let me teach you how to shoot," he said, smiling with that twisted, self-satisfied grin. The words hung in the air a moment before falling flat. Heavy, ridiculous. Dana didn't reply. Her gaze drifted to the spotless barrel of the rifle, then to the copper-colored sky. She pretended to inspect the magazine as if she hadn't heard. Halstead took it as a sign of agreement and straightened his shoulders, confident. It was always the same story. In every unit she had served, there had been a man like him, a superior convinced he had something to prove to her. Some did it out of awkward kindness, others out of pure reflex to dominate. But the result never changed, the same polite, almost benevolent condescension in uniform. Dana had long known that the shortest path to survive in that world was silence. So she simply nodded. "Very well, Captain." The phrase died between them. He seemed satisfied, as if he had solved the problem. That day, she trained alone at the edge of the camp, sweeping over the cardboard targets standing in the dust. Each shot, each correction was carefully logged in her notebook with meticulous regularity. 700, lateral wind 3.4, click drift. Her fingers slid over the bowl with the same ease others turn a key in a lock. Shot after shot, the impacts formed a line perfect in its monotony. That evening, she returned to the common tent. Laughter rose from a table, a name, hers, slipped into the conversation, followed by bursts of amusement. She didn't catch the exact words, but the tone was enough. The girl sniper, that's what they called her. At once a curiosity and a joke. They no longer spoke to her directly. They spoke about her, beside her, as if she were a number. She sat in a corner, took out her notebook, and wrote down a series of numbers on the page. 37, her current total. 37 confirmed shots, clean, distant, unseen. She had never sought recognition, but the contempt wore her down eventually. The next day, Halstead came to her again with the same forced cheerfulness. "We'll start next week," he said, as though granting a privilege. She inclined her head. "Thank you, Captain." There was no next week. She never showed up for the supposed lesson. Still, the rumor caught fire. In less than 48 hours, everyone in camp knew that the captain had decided to teach the liaison girl how to shoot. Some laughed, others stayed neutral, but all shared the same quiet certainty that there was something natural about it. The man teaches, the woman obeys. In the days that followed, her name subtly disappeared from operation plans. First, a reconnaissance mission where there was no room left, then an escort reassigned to other profiles. She didn't protest. She had long stopped expecting justice. But each nightly report, each wind chart she added to her notebook, dug deeper into her mute tension ready to snap. Falcon Ridge, seen from above, looked like an anthill lost in the desert. Sun-bleached tents, vehicles lined up as far as the eye could see, silhouettes moving back and forth in a mechanical ballet. For Dana, the rusted fences barely marked the borders of fields where the grass swayed in the wind like a slow sea. She remembered the sound of metal as they put away their tools, the crack of wood under their steps. War had seemed never to exist there, except in his eyes, the eyes of a former soldier who had never truly left the firing line. She was still a child when he first placed a rifle in her hands. "The secret," he said, "is not to shoot, it's to listen first." She held the stock awkwardly, too heavy for her. The old M1 quivered at the slightest breath. He placed his calloused hands over hers, adjusting her angle, correcting her stance. There were no written lessons. No clever theories, only that patient murmur, observe, breathe. The shot happens before the trigger. The days passed, paced by the bleating of livestock and the distant hammering of the freight train. The school was 15 kilometers away, too far to reach except by horse or pickup. Dana studied mathematics in the evenings by oil lamp, using her father's notebooks. He had died in a mining accident before she was born. Her grandfather used to tell her that a good shooter is first a good calculator. So she added up distances, noted corrections, learned to read the wind's direction in the dust. By 16, she could hit a tin can at 400 meters across uneven ground. The neighbors said she had a marksman's eye, that mix of instinct and cold precision. It wasn't true. What she really had was the patience he had passed on to her. He would spend hours making her watch the shifting shadows on the hills until she no longer saw the shadow but the wind itself. In the evenings by the fire, he rarely spoke of the war. When he did, his tone was flat, the marshes near a village, the snow sticking to his eyelashes, the dry sound of a bolt sliding in the cold. He said that shooting there had nothing glorious about it. It was a matter of order, of necessity. You don't shoot to prove something, he said. You shoot to finish what must be finished. She kept every word, storing them in a corner of her mind like cartridges kept in reserve. Sometimes he would show her a yellowed notebook tied with string, 14 names, scrawled places, faded dates. Confirmations, he explained. No more, no less. She stared at the numbers, fascinated. At the time, she didn't understand what they meant, but after his death, that notebook became her talisman. The old man died one winter morning. Light filtered through the frosted window when she entered the room. He seemed to be leaving effortlessly, his face relaxed. Beside him on the table was a small piece of paper on which he had simply written 14. The pencil had trembled on the number, as if he had hesitated before drawing the loop of the 4. She held it between her fingers, unable to cry. He had always told her, if the world doesn't listen to you, prove it wrong in silence. For a long time, she thought she would stay on the ranch, mending fences and shooting bottles. But Montana, for all its raw beauty, became too small. At 18, she decided to leave. The military recruiter raised an eyebrow when reading her file. Female, modest diploma, no recent family record in the Army. Infantry, not sure that's for you, young lady. She answered calmly, I learned to shoot before I learned to walk straight. The recruiting sergeant laughed, thinking it a boast, but he signed the form anyway. She entered the Army with an imaginary rifle already on her shoulder. Training was harsh, not so much for the discipline as for the looks from others. She made it a point of pride never to falter under the weight of her gear. The other recruits made bets. How many weeks before she'd ask for a transfer? She outlasted every bet, every sneer. At night, when the barracks were asleep, she cleaned her weapon until the steel reflected the moonlight. It was there, on a training field surrounded by red hills, that she finally understood what her grandfather had meant by shooting is listening. It wasn't just reading the wind, it was hearing what the world says just before it falls silent. That second of stillness before the shot, when everything shifts. Her instructor, a weathered-faced sergeant, watched her shot groupings in silence. He finally muttered, You've got something strangely calm about you. She took it as a compliment. Every week, the same ritual, prone shooting, correction, notes in the logbook. Until the day an inspecting commander noticed her results. He took her file, read quickly, and said simply, I want to see her at Fort McFerson, sniper section. At 21, Dana joined it. 2 women in the class, 56 recruits in total. Most came from combat units steeped in a machismo so ingrained it no longer noticed itself. The other woman dropped out in the 3rd week. Dana stayed. She endured the mockery, the absurd tests, the exhaustion, and every time discouragement rose, she ran her finger over the old yellowed paper in her pocket. 14, and that was enough. During the final exam, moving target at 1,000 meters, she finished second. No one remembered her name, only the girl who shoots like a ghost. On the evening of the graduation, she stayed alone in the empty field. The wind blew, heavy with dust. She took one last shot in silence. The bullet struck the steel plate cleanly, ringing out for a long time. Her grandfather would have said, You're ready. She returned to the barracks, put the rifle away, and never spoke of it again. Because deep down, she already knew what it meant. In the world she was about to enter, knowing how to shoot meant nothing. Proving that a woman could do it, that would be the real war. Fort McFerson stretched across the Texas dust like a beige scar. Nothing exotic, nothing glorious, just hangars, straight dormitories, endless shooting ranges. The air vibrated with heat and order. For trainees from all over the world, it was a purgatory where weakness had no place. Dana Mercer arrived there with a half-empty bag, her papers folded in four, and that mix of nervous hope and resignation found in those who already know what awaits them. From the first day, eyes turned toward her, not hostile, but with that calm, almost scientific doubt. What was she doing here? Thin, without that layer of arrogance that usually shields shooters. The instructor lieutenant, a wiry man with visible veins, stared at her for a long moment before saying, "You're not even 5'7", are you?" 160, sir. He chuckled. Then you'll carry heavier. We'll see if you last until Friday. By Friday, she was still standing. Her standard issue M24 pressed to her shoulder, fingers bruised from endless cleaning, neck burned by the sun. She had barely spoken all week. Her quietness irritated as much as it intrigued. The other trainees chatted in the evenings, comparing their units of origin, their trophies. She took notes instead: distance, wind, altitude, pressure. Always those numbers written in black ink, filed away with manic regularity. Writing a thesis, a corporal mocked. She looked up without smiling. No. I just remember better this way. Every morning, before the bugle even sounded, she woke on her own. 15 minutes to get dressed, 2 to inspect the rifle, then straight to the range before the others. There, she watched the sun slice through the dust, gauged the wind's direction without instruments, adjusted her scope by feel. It was more than training, it was a way of thinking, a moving meditation. Her first serious instructor was named Garrett Lane, a former Marine Corps marksman. A long-distance shooting legend, knees ruined, eyes still sharp as an eagle's. He watched her one morning without a word, then positioned himself behind her during an endurance drill. At the end, he lowered his glasses and muttered, "You breathe too high, Mercer." She exhaled slowly. "Yes, sir. Learn to breathe with your belly. The lungs move, the scope moves. If you want it to stay steady, it's your body that must go silent, not the rifle." That was her first true lesson. She would remember it much later, on an Afghan ridge, when every heartbeat seemed to push against the trigger. The weeks passed at a brutal pace, 2 hours of stolen sleep, 15 of shooting and marching corrections. A single minor mistake was enough to send a candidate home. The numbers dropped every Monday, 56 at the start, 39 halfway through, 21 by the end of the second month. 2 women at the beginning, 1 now. The other, Karen Brooks, had broken during a survival test, lips blue under freezing rain. Before leaving, she had taken Dana's hand. "You don't need them to exist, you know." Dana nodded. Yet she stayed. Not for them, but because she didn't know how to exist except by aiming. One night, Garrett Lane caught her still awake, polishing the bolt of her M24 under the yellow corridor light. "You think a clean rifle will buy you peace?" he asked. "No, sir. But I think it'll respect me." He stared at her, then gave a faint smile. "Keep at it. You'll end up teaching them what they don't want to hear." It was at Fort McFerson that she discovered the notebooks of former snipers, worn logs filled with numbers like hers. Instructors required every trainee to record not only technical conditions but also mental impressions. Most scribbled something perfunctory. Dana filled every margin with thoughts, almost prayers: "Don't tremble. Read the wind. Become invisible." At the end of the course, 2 tests remained, the partner shoot and the stealth trial. The first test consisted of hitting 5 targets in under 15 minutes, each at increasing distance. The second required crossing 2 kilometers of terrain while avoiding thermal sensors and hidden observers. She passed both. Her partner missed the last target, but she adjusted the trajectory by 1 click and corrected for him without a word. The instructor said nothing either but wrote something down in his notebook. On the evening of the badge ceremony, they drank lukewarm whiskey from tin cups. Of the 21 who remained, 15 officially passed as snipers. Dana finished second overall, first in pure accuracy. No one congratulated her directly, and that suited her fine. Recognition, she had understood, is a stray bullet, you never know who it might hit. Lane came to see her after the ceremony. "You'll make your mark, Mercer. People don't like acknowledging what unsettles them, but they always end up being forced to." She didn't answer. In the inside pocket of her jacket, the small piece of paper from Montana rested against her chest. She had added a number to it, her first real confirmed shot under simulated conditions, 15. A simple pencil mark, but she felt it vibrate like a heartbeat beneath the fabric. A few days later, she received her first posting, a ranger unit in Jalalabad. The mission was labeled Active Operation. She calmly packed her things, slipped the yellowed paper into her notebook, and boarded the transport without looking back. On the military bus, eyes lost on the endless road, she thought, the training is over. Now begins the real test, the one where no one applauds you for not missing. As the red Texas sun swallowed the convoy in its dust, Dana Mercer left behind what remained of the ranch, of Montana, of the silent student. What rose in her now was something else, not pride, but a kind of anticipation, like a chambered round that had always been waiting. The air in Jalalabad had a smell Dana Mercer would never forget: dust, diesel, and sweat. The base sprawled in a hollow plateau ringed by bluish mountains, where every night seemed to creak under the weight of the tents. Helicopters lifted off at all hours. Dogs barked into the wind as if warning of an invisible threat. It was there that she set her boots for the first time in a war zone. An unofficial assignment, said the file, paired with Master Sergeant Cole Ramirez, lead observer for the Rangers. He assessed her the first time they met, arms crossed, not hostile, but professionally cautious. Where are you from? Fort McFerson. How many confirmed shots? None. He nodded, not mocking, just factual. Then listen more than you talk. They went out on mission 2 days later. A smuggling zone north of the valley, potential target, a Taliban logistics chief. The heat fell like a slab. Dana felt the metal of her rifle burn through her glove. The first night, she lay still for 8 hours without moving, stomach pressed into the earth, watching through the scope as shadows shifted slowly across the enemy compound. Every so often, Ramirez whispered barely audible numbers, distance, wind, direction. When at last the target appeared at 600 meters, everything went still. The noise, the wind, even the blood in her ears faded. The shot broke, clean, sharp, almost graceful. Impact, fall, silence. Her first real kill. Ramirez looked at her without speaking. He noted the time in his logbook and said simply, that was clean. Very clean. It was the first of a series, 6 months, 10 shots, all confirmed. Always the same precision, the same discipline. The name Mercer began to circulate quietly among the Rangers. Not with admiration, such emotion wasn't shown there, but with that silent respect reserved for those who get the job done without a sound. Yet the hierarchy remained silent. At the end of the rotation, Ramirez put her name forward for a citation. The report went up, vanished, then came back 2 weeks later marked denied. He glanced down at the reply, weary. They don't like ghosts. She answered calmly, then I'll stay a ghost. The following missions took her farther east, near the Pakistani border. The valleys there were narrow, the wind swirling between the ridges. She perfected her art until she became an extension of her rifle. The nights were long, sometimes without a single shot. In those sleepless hours, she thought of the ranch, the breath of wind over the grass, the old Garin on the table, and her grandfather's words, the best shooters are the ones no one notices. Once, after 20 hours of observation, they received the order to abort. The target had left the area. The men around her grumbled, frustrated at having risked so much waiting for nothing. Ramirez looked at her with that tired half-smile. You didn't move a millimeter. How much longer could you have held? As long as it took. He nodded, admiring. You missed your calling. You should have been a statue. The days stretched on in exhausting continuity, march, hide, report. Dana faded into the machinery. Through sheer discipline, she began to forget she existed outside of GPS coordinates. Yet each shot brought her back to herself, a breath, a heartbeat, an absolute decision. One evening, after a successful operation, she found Ramirez sitting by a makeshift fire. He handed her a flask. You believe in honor? She hesitated. I believe we do what's necessary so others don't have to. That means yes, he murmured, eyes lost in the flames. They stayed silent. When her rotation ended, he saluted her like a soldier, fist pressed to his heart. Wherever you go, keep proving them wrong. But what followed was less clear. Jalalabad no longer appeared on her file as an active assignment. She was transferred south, first as logistical support, then as technical liaison. Officially, it was a rest rotation. In truth, it was a quiet sidelining. The files of women who had too much success in combat units tended to get lost in bureaucracy. She grew used to administrative silence. They no longer asked much of her, and seemed to prefer she remind no one that she existed. It was the first time she understood that in this profession, knowing how to kill wasn't what mattered most to superiors. It was knowing where and when to stay silent. So she kept recording. Alone, every day, away from the teams, she set up a makeshift target, noted temperature, pressure, drift. Her notebooks filled at the pace of a confession. No pride, no anger, just that calm stubbornness to prove, one shot at a time, that she was still there. In the 6th month, an unexpected mission arrived, securing a humanitarian convoy threatened by ambush. Dana offered long-range support, but they preferred to send a male pair instead. The result, 2 wounded, mission compromised. She stayed silent, though the frustration burned beneath the surface. A few days later, in the mess hall, a captain joked, "That'll teach you not to stay invisible, sister." She looked up slowly. "You survive better when you stay unseen." The room fell silent for a moment before conversations resumed, indifferent. That night, she took out the yellowed paper again. 14. She looked at it for a long time, then wrote in her own notebook, 337, the exact number after Jalalabad. She calculated, more than twice her grandfather's record. And no one, absolutely no one, knew. She smiled despite herself, a brief, hard smile. It was her invisible victory, and her future condemnation. Because already, in the south of the country, another assignment awaited her, Falcon Ridge, a dusty base, a self-assured captain, and soon, a phrase that would set everything in motion. "Let me teach you how to shoot." Falcon Ridge rose in the middle of nowhere, an ocean of rust-colored dust, khaki tents set on cracked concrete slabs. The wind howled day and night, raising whirlwinds no one bothered to chase away. Life there passed between 2 sunsets, without shade or horizon. That's where Dana was sent after Jalalabad, officially as a technical liaison and shooting support. In reality, she had been pushed aside. Command had placed her in a zone where military glory slowly dissolved into the anonymity of routine. Captain Halstead commanded Alpha Company, 34 years old, West Point graduate, neat appearance, confident smile. A man who had grown up more in briefing rooms than on battlefields. He spoke like a manual and stood like a statue. Dana knew from the first moment what to expect. When he saw her name on the shooting roster, he frowned. A woman sniper? The word amused him as much as it bothered him. At the first briefing, she sat quietly at the back of the tent. Halstead presented patrol zones, plan sorties, and logistics equations scrawled in chalk on a board too small. At the end, he swept the room with his eyes. "Questions?" Dana raised her hand, polite. "Sir, I'd like to know the observer's training frequency." Silence. A few heads turned. "Why?" he asked. "To adjust my ballistic tables." Halstead stared at her, surprised. The target had left the area. The men around her grumbled, frustrated at having risked so much waiting for nothing. Ramirez looked at her with that tired half-smile. "You didn't move an inch. How much longer could you have held?" "As long as it took." He nodded, admiring. "You missed your calling. You should have been a statue." The days stretched in an exhausting continuity, march, hide, report. Dana faded into that machinery. By dint of discipline, she began to forget she existed outside GPS coordinates. Yet each shot pulled her back to herself, one breath, one heartbeat, an absolute decision. One evening, after a successful operation, she found Ramirez sitting by a makeshift fire. He handed her a flask. "Do you believe in honor?" She hesitated. "I believe we do what's necessary so others don't have to." "That means yes," he murmured, eyes lost in the flames. They stayed silent. When his rotation ended, he saluted her like a soldier, fist pressed to his heart. "Wherever you go, keep proving them wrong." But what followed was less clear. Jalalabad no longer appeared on her record as an active assignment. She was transferred south, first as logistical support, then as technical liaison. Officially it was a rest rotation. In truth, it was a sidelining. Files of women who had too much success in combat units tended to get lost in bureaucracy. She grew accustomed to administrative silence. They asked little of her and seemed to prefer she remind no one of her existence. It was the first time she understood that in this job, knowing how to kill wasn't what most interested the superiors. It was knowing where and when to be silent. So she kept taking her readings. Alone, every day away from the teams, she set up a makeshift target, noted temperature, pressure, drift. Her notebooks filled at the pace of a confession. No pride, no anger, just that quiet stubbornness to prove, shot after shot, that she was still there. In the 6th month, an unexpected mission came, securing a humanitarian convoy threatened with ambush. Dana offered long-range support, but they preferred to send a male pair. The result, 2 wounded, mission compromised. She remained mute despite the frustration burning beneath the surface. A few days later, in the mess, a captain joked, "That'll teach you not to make yourself seen, sister." She looked up slowly. "You survive better when you stay unseen." The room fell silent for a second before conversations resumed, indifferent. That night she took out the yellowed paper. 14, she looked at it for a long time, then wrote in her own notebook, 337, the exact number after Jalalabad. She calculated the tally, more than double her grandfather's, and no one, absolutely no one, knew. She smiled despite herself, a brief, hard smile. It was her invisible victory and her future condemnation. For already in the south another assignment awaited, Falcon Ridge, a dusty base, a self-assured captain, and soon a phrase that would set everything off. "Let me teach you to shoot." Falcon Ridge rose in the middle of nowhere, an ocean of rust-colored dust, khaki tents set on cracked concrete slabs. The wind howled day and night, raising whirlwinds no one bothered to clear. Life there passed between 2 sunsets, with no shade or horizon. That was where Dana was sent after Jalalabad, officially as a technical liaison and fire support. In reality she had been put aside. Command had slipped her into a zone where military glories dissolved into the anonymity of routine. Captain Halstead ran Alpha Company, 34, West Point graduate, neat appearance, confident smile. A man who had grown up more in briefing rooms than on battlefields. He spoke like a manual and stood like a statue. Dana knew from the first moment what to expect. When he found her name on the firing roster he frowned. A woman shooter? The word amused him as much as it annoyed him. At the first briefing she sat discreetly at the back of the tent. Halstead outlined patrol zones, plan sorties, logistics equations scribbled on a board too small. At the end he swept the room with his gaze. "Questions?" Dana raised her hand, polite. "Sir, I'd like to know the observer's training frequency." A silence, a few heads turned. "Why?" he asked. "To adapt my ballistic tables." Halstead stared at her, surprised, then with that smile that belongs only to a self-assured leader, "I can teach you if you like." "I did precision shooting at university," she said. She felt the words brush her like a soft slap. "That's very kind, Captain." The next day the news had circled the camp, "The captain wants to teach the liaison girl to shoot." Smiles grew more polite. Conversations fell quiet at her approach. Her mission orders disappeared one by one. One morning she found her name crossed off the teen board. In its place, a barely out-of-school soldier took the line. She did not react, but her world narrowed. Free hours became dead hours. Each evening she spent at the training range alone. Through the scope she aimed at the cardboard silhouettes while the base fell asleep. At 900 meters she still felt that strange peace, the world reduced to a firing line, the silence just before the blast. Sometimes a boot sounded behind her, curious onlookers. "What are you training for?" "To stay ready." The answer was enough to make them back off. Little by little, the murmur, "the captain's girl," turned into simple absence. People walked past as if she were invisible. 2 weeks of that treatment seemed endless. She might have resigned herself if not for the request that arrived that day. Special operation, long-range support required. Target unit requests confirmed shooter. Send the best. Major Alan Huggs, operations officer, scrolled through files on his screen. Dana's numbers jumped out at him, 37 confirmed targets. No errors. He called her in at once. "Why have you kept to the sidelines these last few weeks?" he asked. She shrugged slightly. "No one asked me for anything, sir." He looked at her for a long time. In his eyes there was no complaint, no resentment, just that sharp calm that precedes precise decisions. "Prepare your gear, Mercer. You depart at dawn." That night she stayed outside at the edge of camp. The moon made the sand shine like glass. She took the small yellowed paper from her pocket, 14. The original pencil marks had faded under her fingers. On the other side she drew, by hand, a new number, discreet, 37. Then she folded the paper 4 times exactly as always and slipped it carefully against her chest. At daybreak an MH-60 helicopter touched down in the dust. An officer in a dark flight suit climbed down, tall, gray-haired. Captain Bill Gaines, Navy SEALs, he introduced himself. You're Mercer? Yes, sir. Good, you're coming with us. She climbed aboard, strapped her rifle, and did not look back. Falcon Ridge faded into the blur of the rotors, taking with it the muffled laughter, the contemptuous looks, and everything that no longer mattered to her. Above the desert, between white sky and burning relief, Dana closed her eyes for a moment. Each rotation of the blades beat in time with her pulse. Something told her that this time she would no longer need to justify herself, and somewhere deep down a thought formed as clean as a perfect shot: they will see me not because I speak, but because I act. The flight to her drop zone lasted just over an hour. The roar of the rotors drowned out all thought, and Dana watched the arid horizon sweep by in copper and dust. The northern mountains cut like blades between 2 helicopter oscillations. She checked her kit mechanically: optics, magazine, rangefinder, notebook. Each motion a discreet prayer repeated for 10 years. On landing a man was already waiting, tall, lean, a steel outline. Captain William Bill Gaines, 30 years of service in the Navy SEALs. No need for introductions to recognize that kind of leader. He offered his hand. You're Mercer? Yes, sir. I saw your file, 37 confirmed targets. That's correct. Yes, sir. Then we'll make it 40. He led her into a small corrugated building where a satellite map covered an entire wall, red lines linking several points north of the province. Our target, he said, is Akani, the principal financier of a Taliban network. He funds attacks across the south. Intelligence places him here, in a hillside complex. He pointed to a circle. Window of action, 14 hours. He disappears after that. We've set up the operation for tomorrow morning. You'll need a spotter. A man entered without sound, Sergeant Mason Pike, broad-shouldered, red beard, calm eyes. I heard you're the ghost of Falcon Ridge. If you prefer, Dana replied. Then I suppose the shot will be historic. They got to work immediately. For hours, they combed through satellite images, marked the GPS coordinates, and simulated the bullet's trajectory. Estimated distance, 1,830 meters, Pike announced. Negative angle, 11 degrees. Crosswind unstable. We'll have a 2-minute window, no more. The challenge was considerable. The terrain offered no cover for an approach. The only viable point lay on a rocky ridge exposed to the wind. They would have to shoot in the open, then exfiltrate before the enemy forces in the valley understood what had happened. That evening, Gaines gathered the unit, 6 SEALs, 3 technicians, Pike, and Dana. Around the table, silence reigned. He laid out the plan, then pointed to Dana. Here's your shooter. A murmur rippled through the room. Lieutenant Commander Nathan Cross frowned. With all due respect, Captain, she's Army. Exactly, Gaines said. And she's the best. The numbers don't lie. If anyone wants to object, now's the time. No one spoke. Cross just looked away. Gaines nodded, satisfied. Good. Departure at 0400. Light team. No radio traffic before confirmation of the shot. That night, beneath the thin canvas of the tent, Dana barely slept, not from fear, but because her whole body already vibrated at the thought of the shot. It was a kind of cold excitement, that taut line between logic and imminent death. She recited her notes silently in the dark: thermal load, muzzle velocity, estimated drift. Then she touched for a moment the yellowed paper in her pocket. 14. The number took her back to the old ranch, to the blue hills of Montana, to her grandfather's rough voice. She remembered him sitting on the porch steps, rifle across his knees. There's no audience in this job, kid. Only the truth. You either know it, or you don't. Tomorrow, she would know. At 3:45, they lifted off packed tight inside the MH-60. Visors down, faces calm, the night air slipped through the side door. Pike checked the rangefinder one last time, then glanced at her. Breathing steady? Always, she replied. Then we'll be fine. The helicopter dropped them near a dry riverbed. From there, they continued on foot, silent, only the rhythm of breath and the soft creak of gear. Each step brought Dana closer to that perfect moment when everything else disappears. As they reached the ridge, the sky turned gray. Dawn revealed the valley below, and farther off, the stone walls of the target compound. Dana studied the distance. 1,830 meters, exactly as they'd planned. She lay down behind the rifle, adjusted the scope, and slid the bolt with care. Wind speed, she murmured. 5 knots, gusting to 8. Temperature 28, pressure 910. They recalculated everything in sync, numbers flowing like a prayer bead by bead. Nothing mystical, just pure, perfect physics. Pike scanned the valley through his spotting scope. Target in sight. Movement confirmed. Command's voice came through the radio, engagement authorized. Visual contact secure. Dana drew a long, deep breath. The rifle trembled slightly against her shoulder, that faint shiver of waiting. She placed the crosshairs exactly on a point of the wall where the door was about to open. Pike's voice broke the silence. Target moving. Akani's out. Then everything became simple. There were no ranks, no doubts, no past humiliations, only her, the wind, the bullet, and the truth. Wind left. 3 clicks, Pike said. Her finger brushed the trigger softly. At the shot, the world fell silent. The rifle's report was clean, almost muted in the wind. At that distance, even the sound seemed to hesitate before returning. Dana felt only the sharp recoil of the stock against her shoulder, then nothing. The bullet was already flying, invisible, through the quivering heat of the morning. 3 seconds later, the figure in the courtyard collapsed, clean, soundless. Impact confirmed, Pike said calmly. The radio crackled. Gaines, watching from an observation post lower in the valley, confirmed in turn. Target neutralized. Good shot. Dana stayed still for a few more breaths, eyes fixed through the scope. Around her, the others were already moving, dismantling, folding, preparing to retreat. But she stayed fixed on the tiny scene below, where the dust was slowly settling back into place. Let's go, Mercer, murmured Pike. Yes. She dismantled the rifle in silence. Each piece slid into its place in that precise choreography learned over years. No wasted movement, no comment. Success wasn't celebrated, it was protected. The descent was quick, punctuated by a few distant bursts of gunfire. The team reached the extraction zone before noon. Gaines was waiting near the MH-60, goggles pushed up, features drawn but satisfied. My congratulations, Mercer, he said. That was a perfect shot. She nodded. Thank you, Captain. Beside her, Pike shook his head, letting out a breath of incredulous laughter. I've seen a lot of good shooters, but that was art. They climbed back aboard. As the blades began to turn again, Dana closed her eyes and let the roar of the rotors erase every thought. After each mission, the world always seemed more distant, as if she left behind a piece of herself each time. But this time, something new had settled in her, a kind of peace, and secretly, a sense of justice. Back at base, Gaines went straight to the radio room, report in hand, confirming the elimination. The other SEALs murmured among themselves, a mix of drained tension and disbelief. Cross approached her while Pike packed up the instruments. I was wrong, he admitted without excuse. It's all right, she said. You're not the first. No, he replied, but probably the last. She gave a faint smile. Later, when everything was stored away, Gaines returned, file in hand. You know, that shot's going to make noise. I'd rather it stayed quiet. Too late, he sighed. The staff officers want to know how a simple liaison pulled off the most precise shot of the rotation. Then tell them I just did my job. The captain chuckled softly. You don't get it, Mercer. What you did, it's rare. At that distance, with that wind, we're talking 1 shot in 1,000. You'd better get used to it. Soon they won't be able to ignore you. She lowered her eyes to the shooting log she held tightly. On line 38, she wrote, engagement, confirmed. Then beneath the number, 1 word, Akani. That evening, the whole base buzzed. Reports came in that the financier's death had paralyzed several insurgent cells. According to command, the mission had prevented a series of attacks. Gaines received a coded message of congratulations. As always, he just nodded. Dana stayed alone in the dim light of the hangar, her rifle cleaned and disassembled on a metal table. Each piece, each trace of oil, reminded her of a life ended 2 kilometers away. She felt neither pride nor guilt, only that familiar emptiness. The calm after the shot, the space left by a perfect kill. Around midnight, Pike poked his head through the door. "Coffee? Not tonight." "You did good, Mercer. Just wanted to say that." She barely smiled. "Thanks, Mason. You're the one who read the wind." He shrugged and left. She stayed a while longer, fingers resting on the cold bolt. This shot wasn't just a success, it was the answer that years of silence had been waiting for. When she finally closed the case, the night wind brushed the tin roofs like a familiar breath. Without bitterness, she thought, they can laugh all they want. The figures, they don't lie. Sleep was impossible. So she went outside, sat at the edge of the camp, and watched the stars rise over the hills. Each light reminded her of a past target, a point of aim, a suspended instant. The desert fell silent again. In the distance, already, a new rotor was beating the air. Another mission was coming. But this time, no one would ask, "Can you shoot?" They all knew. 3 days after Operation Akani, everything changed at Saran Base. The silence, once indifferent, now carried a strange tone, respect mixed with fear. When Dana walked through the corridors, conversations stopped on their own. She could feel that ripple around her, as if the bullet she'd fired was still moving, brushing past each person it passed. Captain Gaines summoned her. On his desk lay a sealed folder bearing the Pentagon's insignia. "Your mission is confirmed," he said. "Target eliminated, no collateral losses. Command sends its congratulations." "Congratulations," she replied, "are just a signature at the bottom of a report." He raised his eyebrows. "You always react like this when you succeed." "I just remember what it cost to make it happen." He hesitated, then added, "They're offering you a transfer, strategic level. There, you don't shoot. You decide where others will. Think about it." Outside, the dust whipped her face in the wind. The air smelled of kerosene and endings. Pike found her at the firing range late that night. No lamp, just the faint light of the stars. "You know they won't let you shoot anymore," he said. "I know. Then why keep training?" "So I don't forget." He sat beside her, listening to the rhythmic clicking of the mechanism. "You don't live in the past." "The past, Mason," she said, "is my coordinates. Without it, I don't know where to aim." He didn't answer, just gave a faint smile. "Tomorrow I'm being sent back to the States," he murmured. "Keep your scope clean." "Promise." The following week, the official order arrived, reassignment to the Strategic Analysis Division of SOCOM. Immediate reporting, no medal ceremony, no honors, just an administrative transfer. Before leaving, she had her M24 disassembled. Every piece was carefully wiped and stored. She kept only the bolt, engraved with its serial number. The technician handed her the return form. "You like weapons, ma'am?" he asked. "Let's say," she replied, "they listened to me." The flight to Washington lasted over 10 hours. Through the window, the desert faded, swallowed by the evening haze. Dana took out the folded paper, the one with the first number written back in Montana, 14. Beneath it, other numbers had been added, 37, 38. She added at the bottom, 0, temporary. As long as she wouldn't shoot again, the line would remain suspended. The capital greeted her under a sky of steel gray, thick with air conditioning and rain. In the new center, everything gleamed, tinted glass, tasteless coffee, silent hallways. They gave her a badge, a computer, and satellite images. No one really knew who she was. Officially, ballistics analyst, Mercer D. Now she observed other shots on screens, figures, code names, coordinates. Somewhere out there, another finger pulled a trigger. Every line she approved with her authorization click echoed inside her like a distant reflection of her own. A month later, a letter arrived. Confidential note of commendation. Her military reward amounted to a single impersonal paragraph. She slid the letter into a drawer without rereading it. That evening, alone in the bare apartment, she took out the old scrap of paper again. On the last line, one single, clear number, 38. She stared at it for a long time. It wasn't a count, or glory, or remorse. It was a trajectory, her way of walking through the world, decision after decision, click after click, the exact sum of what she had become. She folded the paper again, slipped it into her pocket, and climbed to the roof. The night air flowed over her skin like a tide of shadow. Below, the city pulsed, impersonal, endless. She looked up at the stars, half erased by neon light, and thought. Every bullet one day returns to the one who fired it, in another form, under another name, but it's always the same. She inhaled slowly, held her breath, the perfect routine, and exhaled without a sound. Just that absence of noise, the only peace she had ever earned. The days ticked by in the mechanical regularity of Washington. Dana Mercer now lived between two worlds, one real and cold, the offices of SOCOM, the other secret and internal, a memory populated by targets and invisible trajectories. Each morning she arrived before dawn, launched observation satellites, and adjusted wind models for other shooters. As the weeks passed, she felt the distance reverse. Once, she had aimed from the ground. Now she watched from above, and the wider the view, the less she felt she touched the world. One afternoon, a confidential note appeared in her secure inbox. Priority briefing, Special Cell RES-14. The name meant nothing to her. She entered a room stripped of all unit markings. 3 unknown officers, in uniforms without insignia, were waiting. Commander Mercer, one of them said, consulting a file, you're here to evaluate a proposal. Which one? An autonomous elimination program. Drones capable of replicating human sniper behavior. Your mission profiles were used as the algorithm's foundation. Dana felt the back of her neck tighten. My exact profiles, your 38 confirmations, your weather conditions, your shooting corrections. You're, in short, our benchmark. A heavy silence. She understood. They had turned her years in the field into an equation, her breathing into lines of code. And you want me to approve this? We want you to optimize it. Only you can calibrate the human factor. She closed the file without a word. I'll give you my answer tomorrow. That night, she couldn't sleep. The steady hum of the ventilation reminded her of a rifle being cleaned. She took out the scrap of paper, spread it on the table, 14, 37, 38. Slowly, she added 39, then stopped. No, that number shouldn't come from a machine. In the morning, she returned to the meeting room. One of the officers projected a simulation on the screen. A drone flew over a mountain valley. Angle, distance, pressure, every familiar parameter. When the fire command flashed in red, the machine shot. Perfect impact. No hesitation. The room applauded quietly, like during a product demo. Precision, 100%, said the operator. And conscience, 0%, murmured Dana. The head of the cell looked up. Excuse me? Your weapon aims, shoots, and hits, but it never doubts. And it's doubt that defines us. That evening, she wrote her evaluation report. 3 clean sentences. The system works. Operationally dangerous. Ethically void. She sent it without copying anyone, already anticipating the consequences, the calls, the hierarchy's pressure. But deep down, her decision was made. 2 days later, Gaines burst into her office. He wore the same simple field clothes as before, despite being in the Capitol. What the hell did you do? The Pentagon's on fire. Your report's frozen the entire project. That's good, isn't it? I just saved some lives. You just put 6 months of staff work on hold. Then they should thank me. He stared at her for a long moment before sitting down. You could have disappeared quietly here, Dana. Why start the war again? Because it never stops. We just changed the weapon. For an instant, he seemed to understand. Then he exhaled. You just widen the target. And this time, it's you they're aiming at. The following days were blurry, interrogations, suspension, classified reports. She answered calmly, without recanting a word. Then one morning, without explanation, her badge stopped working. She left behind the dark screen, the empty desk. As she stepped out of the building, for the first time in months, she felt real, unfiltered air. The autumn wind swept the street, carrying that same dry scent as the desert. On a bench, she took out the old paper and added a new line in pencil, not a number this time, stop. She folded the sheet carefully, put it in her pocket, and lifted her eyes toward the pale sun of an October afternoon. Around her, cars, footsteps, noise. All of it distant now, out of reach. She thought of all her shots, not of the lives they had taken, but of those they had stopped. Then, in a barely audible breath, she whispered, "End of count." When Gaines later read the final report left on his desk, he found only one handwritten line in English. "It takes a human to know when not to pull the trigger." And beneath it, drawn in dry pencil, one last, solitary number, 0. That day, Dana Mercer officially disappeared from the Defense Department's records, neither dismissed nor decorated, simply erased. But somewhere, in the memory of a program named Dull Aries, her model remained encoded as a reference, profile, Mercer. Human standard. And the world kept aiming without her.